I'm Ayesha Siddiqa from London with Neighbours Talking for Neador TV. This is a program which brings neighbours together to talk about issues which are critical for South Asia. Today we have with us Sunita Narain, who's an environmentalist and writer. A very impressive resume, I must say. She's currently Director General of the New Delhi based Center for Science and Environment, and it was in recognition for 4 decades of research and advocacy, raising consciousness on environmental challenges and presenting a poor, poor, pro-poor perspective both globally and nationally, that in 2005, the Indian government awarded her with the Padma Shri, one of the nation's highest civilian honors. She was also made a member of the Prime Minister's Council for Climate Change that decides on actions to address climate change impacts. She has been member of the National Ganga River Basin Authority and was awarded the Stockholm Water Prize in 2005 and Prince Albert II of Monaco Foundation Award for her work to build a water literate society. I can go on and on. She has many awards. And in fact, but I must point out that in 2016, Time magazine featured her as one of the 100 most influential people in the world for advocacy on poor and the environment and climate change. So, Ms. Narayan, I turn to you for some help in understanding what is happening in South Asia. I mean, there were rains in Assam, then you've seen what has happened in Pakistan, 190% more rain than normal. What is happening in South Asia?
So, Aisha, what's happening in South Africa is really what we should have expected. We have what I call a double whammy. On the one hand, we have completely messed up our drainage systems. So let's be clear that what's happened in Assam, what's happening across India, in fact, as I speak to you, the city of Bangalore is underwater. And there are images of people being ferried around in boats. We have the horrific pictures coming out of Pakistan where massive inundation has happened. Now, there are two factors here. On the one hand, it is what we as South Asians are doing in our own country. Let's be absolutely clear about this, that none of our countries, our governments, our city planners spend any time thinking about the drainage that a city requires to make sure that the city does not go under when there are floods, or the country does not go under. We have dammed our rivers, we have filled up our ponds and tanks, we have built houses in the floodplains, we have made sure that we have deliberately um, 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 made ourselves more vulnerable to floods. That's the first thing. The other, and this is now what is the change scenario, because we've always had floods in Asia, but what is changing today is really the intensity, the ferocity, and the extent of the flooding.
So
And
it's not entirely nature.
it's not only nature. Nature comes, I mean, you could argue that even climate change is not nature. Climate change is about the emissions that human beings have pumped into the atmosphere, and as a result of it, today we have a warming planet. And South Asia today is seeing the impact of that, because what you see in Pakistan today is what we are seeing across India, is that it does not rain, it pours. I'll give you one statistic, Aisha, just for your viewers to understand this. In South Asia, it rains for an average of 100 hours in a year. Just think about this, 100 hours in a year. Out of 3,800 hours in a year, it rains for just about 100 hours. That's the average rainfall we get. We get it during our monsoon period, and even within the monsoon period, we get it for a limited number of days and hours. Now, with climate change, you will get more rain in fewer number of rainy hours. And that's the change scenario that you're seeing today. So it isn't as if we have not had floods. It is not as if we have not had monsoon rains. But now with climate change, you will see more rain in fewer number of rainy hours. And that's what the mess in Pakistan, the flooding in Pakistan, the devastation in Pakistan and many parts of India that we have seen, rainfall comes 190%, 200, 300% of the year's rainfall comes in a matter of a few hours.
And
It,
if I could also
yes,
educate myself, you see, what has happened is that most of the rain is concentrated in southern parts of Pakistan, not the
mhm,
north. Now,
okay.
it almost seems that monsoons are leaving some parts out and including some parts. So, is that part of the of climate change or what?
So, Aisha, that's a very good question. I don't have the data for Pakistan. We put together data for India on a regular basis. And we map the rainfall and the changes in rainfall. The Indian IMD puts out the data, and we use that to aggregate and understand what are the changing variations, what are the variations we are seeing. And what we are seeing today, for instance, in India is we are seeing more sub regional variations more and more. So, for instance, the
Okay.
northeast of India is now showing up to be very vulnerable because it is seeing decline in rainfall, actual decline in rainfall. And yet, it's ironic because northeast this year has had very bad flooding instances. But if you look at the trend in rainfall, you are seeing a decline in rainfall in the northeast. Now, what climate change will also do is that, as I said, you will get these intense downpours, and the overall trend will show up as more variation. So, some regions will get less rainfall, some regions will get more rainfall. The problem in all this is that our meteorological departments measure rainfall by the quantum of rainfall. Now, when you look
Okay.
at that, they say, oh, but it's okay. We've had an above average monsoon, or we've had a just about below average monsoon. But it's normal monsoon. But it's not normal anymore. The new normal today is going to be intense rainfall, which, if we in South Asia don't go back to our traditions, our understanding, our wisdom of holding rain where it falls, recharging the groundwater, rebuilding our tanks and ponds, reinvesting in all our green spaces, because that's the drainage that we require, we will see more and more floods. And I think that's the lesson our governments must take home, and quickly.
So, this is not a freak event.
No. No.
This will
Under
happen
no
again.
circumstances is this a freak event. This is a clear trend, and let's be absolutely clear, the trend is showing more rainfall in fewer number of rainy days, more extreme rain events, and this will lead to flooding. Please be clear, Aisha. India, half of India, in Assam, our data shows that Assam, three-fourths of Assam was underwater. And the Assam floods this year started in April and have not even ended now. People have not even left the evacuation homes. Most of India today has seen very, very severe flooding. Okay? And as I'm telling you, even as we are speaking, Bangalore is underwater. So this is not a freak event at all. This is now a trend. And if we don't accept that, we are not going to get serious about making sure we can fix what we can fix. Listen, we can't fix completely as much as I'd like to. And as you know, CSE and my research on climate change has been to argue for equity in climate change negotiations. It has been to argue for the right of development of countries like ours, for our ability to be able to get a fair share of the carbon budget. The fact of the matter is, we have the worst politics in the world, the most inequitable world today. And so, in spite of the developed countries talking so big about their promises on climate change, they have done very little to actually reduce their greenhouse gas emissions. They are not on track. And
Hmm.
I cannot see us being able to combat climate change at the scale and speed we need to. We have raised temperatures by 1.1 degrees centigrade over 1850 as of today. We are definitely on track for 1.5 degrees centigrade rise, even higher. Now, if at 1.1 degree centigrade rise, you're seeing the kind of devastation you've seen in Pakistan, be very clear, we have only got worse things to happen in the years to come. So our governments must realize the enormity of and the scale of the challenge they have, and get ready to at least fix what they can fix. And there is a lot we can fix at our
So,
end.
so, so the question is that as in South Asia,
Yeah,
what can we do? I mean, this both the states and societies,
yeah.
to fight this, to mitigate our challenges.
So it's a very good question, I think. And I'm not going to get into the climate change politics and everything we have to do to be able to fight for a more just world, and everything we have to do to be able to get emission reductions happening at the scale that they happen. I'm not going to get into that for the moment. Let's
Okay.
concentrate on what we need to do to make sure that this season of devastation that we are seeing, this season of despair that we are seeing, to some extent we can manage it. Now, let's take some lessons from, say, the Indian government or the Indian Meteorological Department on its
Okay.
extraordinary work on forecasting cyclones in the region. Okay, um,
Okay.
it is really incredible. Our science has reached a point where scientists today can forecast pretty accurately the cyclones that are going to hit our part of the world. And this is in spite of the fact that we are seeing with climate change what is today being called a rapidification of cyclones, which means that they become more unpredictable and difficult to say where will they go, where will they move, how much rain will they bring. In spite of that, science in the region has really shown itself to be mature and robust enough to be able to predict the cyclones. And this is showing up in the fact that both Bangladesh and India, which were hit very badly because of cyclones, the information sharing happens between the two countries, and it is very clear that we are not seeing the casualties that we have seen in the past. You will remember,
Okay.
Aisha, the super cyclone of Orissa, the many cyclones that have hit, where there have been millions in South Asia who have died. Now, cyclones happen, we are able to evacuate people, we are able to move people, and that is a very important part of disaster management. But it will not work for floods as much as it will work for
Okay.
cyclones. Okay?
That's
Because
what I was about to ask you.
because flooding is really about being able to tell you, one, how much rainfall. That science is now more and more capable, and for instance the Indian IMD is pretty accurate in telling you if you're going to have a heavy rainfall event. And now they have even changed their definitions because of climate change. They have now started calling heavy rainfall events. They've started giving very advanced warnings, knowing that there's going to be. But it's not good enough, because the flooding
Okay.
is not just because of the rainfall, it's also about the rainfall in the region. It's on the ability of the region to be able to hold the water. If you have a dam upstream, it may discharge more water. So, for flooding, governments really in South Asia need to understand that we are going to have to live with extreme rainfall events. If we accept that, then we will invest in drainage. Drainage means we go back and check on every
Okay.
pond and tank, and talk about every way in which stormwater drains can take the water that rains and recharge our groundwater. It's actually a win-win, Aisha, because the more you recharge your groundwater, the more you have water over the prolonged drought season. Think
Could you
about
explain?
Pakistan.
Could you explain this concept of recharge and uh,
Yeah, I guess you're all
very
security
quickly?
people. For you, all this is heavy
I'm
science.
sorry. Yeah, I'm sorry.
Very simple.
Security
Very simple.
types need to
I
educate
know,
ourselves
so the
too.
security types, no clue about what happens on the ground. Okay, so this
Indeed.
is about capturing rain as it falls. It's very simple. You get
Okay.
rain, you want to make sure that you can capture it. Now, how would you capture it? I've been to Lahore. I have seen the ponds, the tanks that you had, the baulis that you had. Same tradition we had in Rajasthan, same tradition we have in Delhi. We had an extraordinary tradition in South Asia of harvesting rain where it falls. It was a
Okay.
tradition in which societies had learned to live with their water endowment. Today, because of
Hmm.
our desire to turn every piece of land into building, we have destroyed all our water bodies. Okay, they have
Okay.
all become residential complexes or garbage dumps. Okay, we don't believe in local water harvesting. So the water that we are getting from far distances, pipelines, and our municipal engineers are getting us the water. But we had a huge tradition, knowledge of doing rainwater harvesting. What I'm arguing is that with climate change, we have to do this, and but at a 10x scale. What you could do 10 years ago, you just have to make sure you can magnify that a lot more. Because as
Right.
you can see, the rain is now so intense that one piddly little tank here or there is not going to help. You're going to have to make sure that you have adequate drainage in your cities, in your rural areas. Because today, I don't know about Pakistan, I haven't visited for a long time Lahore or Karachi area, but I can tell you the farmers across the northwest, the Indo-Gangetic plain, or if you call it the Indus plains of
Right.
India, they desperately require water security. They're digging more and more, deeper and deeper.
Yeah. 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 That's happening in Pakistan too.
I would imagine so. Now, the only way we can deal with that is to make sure that you can harvest the rain as locally as possible. Now, the flooding is a boon for farmers to some extent because it does recharge the groundwater. So, even if you've lost one crop, you can be better off in the second crop because you have better soil moisture. But the trouble
Right.
today is, but the trouble is, Aisha, this was good in theory, but in practice you have a bad flooding instance, and then you have these extreme heat which happens, which means that you have all the land again dries up. So unless farmers and governments do deliberate water harvesting, holding the water where it falls, draining it
Okay.
to places where they can hold the water, recharge it into the groundwater, you will
Ah.
essentially go into a situation where you have floods and then droughts, and more because of climate change today.
But that would also require huge investment, wouldn't it?
Yes, it would. To a large extent, this you could call is an adaptation measure for countries. And it's also part of the reparation that countries should be asking for. I mean, I feel when I say this to you, Aisha, I also know um, the absolute hypocrisy of the rich countries where today, if you look at Pakistan and you look at the science of attribution, then the science of attribution can now fingerprint and tell you that the Pakistan floods have so much percentage of the floods have to do with climate change. Okay,
Oh,
that
wow.
the
All right.
science is
Okay.
accurate enough to
Yeah.
fingerprint that. Okay, but
Okay.
the point is, it's theory because who's going to give you the money for Pakistan to pick itself up and to go on? And my problem is, the instances in India, at least that we are tracking, are becoming so frequent that people don't have the ability to pick themselves up and then rebuild their lives. See, South Asians are very resilient people. I have seen
Indeed.
community after
Indeed.
community, they go under, they somehow pick themselves up, and then they restart. The disasters are happening today with such frequency that they don't have the capacity to be able to pick themselves up and rebuild their lives. Now, your security lens must come in here, Aisha, because all
Right.
data is now showing internal migration rates are going through the roof. In
Sure.
fact,
Sure.
the migration report, the human migration report that is put out now, has now got a new category called new displacement. And over
Okay.
war and conflict, flood and droughts are becoming the new reasons for people to leave their homes, their villages, and move to cities, to new countries. Now, this is really going to also add to the whole. I mean, you already have such a toxic dialogue on immigrants in the West.
Exactly. Exactly.
And
You're right.
this is only going to get worse because in our part of the world, I can tell you, half of Delhi lives in what you would call an informal settlement, just because people are leaving their homes and moving to cities. And I'm sure that's happening in Lahore. I'm sure that's happening in Karachi. I'm sure it's happening in all cities of Pakistan as well.
Indeed, indeed. I mean that pressure,
Yeah.
we haven't even counted for that. But what can we as South Asia, can South Asia come together? I mean, it's a common challenge that we have.
Yeah. I think it's a very good point. I hope South Asia, I mean, South Asia did work together on negotiations on climate change. I can tell you that when my colleague Anil Agarwal and I were in Rio in 1992, and we had done a report called Global Warming in an Unequal World, a case of environmental colonialism. We not only had the Indian government, but the Pakistani government actually included our report in their submission on climate change. So I think we have a common. We definitely have to negotiate together, which to some extent we do through G77 and China and all the rest. But I don't think we have a South Asian identity in which we are negotiating. And we need to. I mean, Nepal, Bangladesh, Pakistan, Sri Lanka, India, Bhutan, we are equally vulnerable. And
And
Maldives,
let's not, yeah, let's not forget Maldives, I was about to say, which is
exactly.
going to go
Equally.
under.
Yeah, well, I mean, Maldives is not going to go under. So don't take it, don't take your security issues to that extent. Yes, we will. Maldives will see more sea surges, and yes, there is indication that sea level rise is happening. But what you're seeing today is much worse. You're seeing today cyclonic activities intensify. You're seeing sea surges as a result of the cyclonic activities happen, and that's leading to more destruction. So the going under will happen in some years. There is not enough modeling to say which year that will happen. But I think what Maldives is definitely going to go through, as the rest of the South Asian region is going to go
More
through,
cyclones.
is my more cyclones and more unpredictable cyclones which are beginning. I mean, India last year had the most bizarre cyclone. We never get cyclones in the Bay, in the Arabian Sea. Cyclones happen in the Bay of Bengal. We are now beginning to see cyclones in the Arabian Sea, which is affecting Pakistan as well. We've had cyclones which have gone through the landmass of India, moved from the Arabian Sea to the Bay of Bengal. I mean, the weirdest of events are beginning to happen, and we are most vulnerable. The poor of the world who live in South Asia have not contributed to the stock of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere. They are the worst impacted today.
So if I can ask, I mean, as something, as a strategy to stop, what about, you know, planting trees? I mean, does it contribute at all?
It does, but not at the scale that we need to. I think, definitely in the Himalayas, if you want to secure the Himalayas, because the Himalayan landslides is another reason for, the cloudburst that you're seeing in the Himalayas today is leading to what is called globs, glacier lakes formed because of glaciers coming down. And that
Okay.
basically, but remember, Aisha, Himalayas are the youngest mountain ranges in the world. They are the most fragile, vulnerable mountain range in the world. Okay. They are
Okay.
not your Alps. They are not your Aravallis. They are not your Western Ghats. They are the Himalayas. And so the
Okay.
respect with which we have to treat the Himalayas is very different. But yes, planting trees in the Himalayas would help to improve the catchment. Planting trees in cities will help us to improve. Planting trees per se does not help. But if cities had a drainage master plan, and let's say Lahore had said, I have green areas that I will keep for just drainage, okay?
Okay.
Because green areas help to improve the drainage of your city. Now, if you did that, then the green that you would protect there, the trees you would protect there, would be important. But planting a tree here or there is not, I'm sorry, Aisha, it's one of those, 10 ways to save the planet. And the planet is fried. It's much beyond our 10 cute ways of saving it.
Right. Let me ask you just one last question, which is that how does this climate change contribute towards increased poverty? I'm sure this is going to be one of the results.
So it's a spiral. There is no direct linkage. You can't say it's climate change and therefore people are poor. What you're seeing is
Right,
climate change is adding to the extreme rain events in our region, which is adding to the
right.
vulnerability of the very poor who are already poor. You cannot only blame climate change. You have to be very clear. Our governments are equally responsible. We have an agrarian distress, which is then on top of it, we get climate change. We have got mismanagement of our land and water, and on top of it, we get climate change. So, all that then adds to increased poverty, increased marginalization. And the most important thing, what it does, and that's what really should bother us, is see, our governments are putting in a lot of effort into building a development future for our people. There's no point in
Okay,
just saying our governments are bad. Our governments are doing what they can. Okay, there are schools being
right.
built, there are hospitals being built, there are water supply schemes being done. Now, what happens with every flood? It takes away that development dividend. It takes away that investment that is made. That makes
Sure.
people even poorer. And in South Asia, the most important wealth of our people is their livestock. And every
Yeah.
time you get a flood event or a drought event, it is the loss of the livestock, more than even the house that people live in, that leads to their increased poverty. So, yes, climate change will increase the spiral of poverty and marginalization in South Asia.
Right. Thank you, Sunita Narain, for educating me. A person who definitely needs to get educated about environment and climate change, and sharing your thoughts about how countries individually and as a region can come together. So, ladies and gentlemen, viewers, listeners, I think it's important for you to hear what Sunita just said in these 24 minutes. But very importantly, what she's pointed out that while climate patterns are changing, globally, international governments, developing countries are responsible, but our own governments in underdeveloped states, in South Asia in particular, they also need to rethink of how they're planning their cities, how they're planning development, and invest in traditional methods for saving the region, our part of the world, from such calamities. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Aisha. Pleasure to be with you. Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you. Bye.